Okay, here we are on to chapter 21. We just talked about in the previous chapter the shortcut for border, and now we're just going to take a look at the shortcut for background. We could set the background color and the background image separately like we had before. So now we have the shortcut that allows us to do the color, then an image if we would like, and you can put both of these, by the way. The position of the image, and then the size and whether we want it to repeat or not. Now, the size property is new to CSS3, and it'll stretch or shrink the size of the graphic without doing it inside of a graphic design program. Sorry, allergies today. But we do know that sometimes that can mess up our image a little bit. So if you have some huge amounts of resizing, you might run into some issues. Things can get stretched in weird ways. And we can set the background size property of an element, not just an image of an element, on its own, as its own property. It doesn't have to be part of the background shortcut. If we did that, here's what it would look like. So we have our background size, and then the values we would put in would be pixel width and height. We're doing that in this example with pixels. If you don't set one of them, like if you don't set the width and you just put auto, and then you set the height, then the browser will automatically choose the appropriate width to keep the ratio of the image. You can also set the background size with percentage, and here's an example of that. And again, if you do auto, then it'll automatically do the width. So in this case, we set the height to be 150 pixels, and it did the width according to the image size. In this case, we said we wanted the height, to be 100% of the element. So the border box is the size of the actual element, and so it filled the element. And so this percentage is based on the element size, not the image size, not the original size of the image. You can also set the background size with some keywords. So one is called cover, and it will basically scale the image until it covers the entire element. And that means part of your image might get cut off, as in this example. The contain keyword will make sure that your entire image fits inside the element. So in this case, it adjusted so that the width, which was the bigger of the two measurements, would fit inside. And then you have some white space on the top. Cover takes the smaller, whether it's width or height. So in this case, it took height, made it fill the element, and then chopped off some of the width. You can also add more than one image. You can layer it. That's new with CSS3. There might be opportunities to do this. You will see this exact example in the CompuScholar text. It is ugly. They're just using it as an example. If you layer a background color and an image, then you might have some need for the image itself to have a transparent background. So if you're downloading it, you would want to make sure it has a transparent background, or if you're creating the image yourself, I mean, maybe you don't want it, but this just would be the difference in the two. And you can set the background size. This shows two ways of doing it. So this is the background shortcut here, the first one, and so here's where I set the color as part of the shortcut. In this example, I did not set the color as part of the shortcut. I just set the image and the position of the image and the size and no repeat. And then separately, I set the background color for cyan. These both work. Both works. So let's try it. We're going to open our global.css. And we're going to add right under this license agreement comment, we are going to add a rule for our body. We don't actually have a body rule right now. So we want to put this at the very top because we want the rule for the entire body of the HTML document to be rendered first. So you're going to go to your copy code documents, chapter 21, activity 1. There's our body rule. Going to copy that and paste it right here where I had my space put in. So here's a background shortcut. I just added a comment there. So we have the color, then the image. I did not specify oh wait, so no repeat, right and bottom. Are those in the right order? I copied that from the text. I felt like it should be in the opposite order, or like it should say right bottom first and then no repeat. Curious. Let's see if it matters. So let's open the file called funnyfish1. And notice we have scaled up the background image, which in this case is octopus.png, which you should have copied into your site style folder. And we said contain. So we want it to fill up the background, but not cut off any of our image. So we can see this. I'm looking for Wonny Fish. There it is. Okay, so you notice down here we have a little octopus peeking out at us. And it looks like it's only here, but it is covering the whole thing because it has this gradient thing going on. Just wanted to look to what else our body rule was doing. So we're using a font family. We're setting it for the default fonts that will be used. These are browser compatible fonts, so we don't have to have font files for those. We're setting the default color, font size, font weight, taking away any padding, and then we're setting up our background. Okay. Another CSS3 property is a gradient. So in CSS3, you can use a gradient property anywhere you would normally use an image. So here's the two different types: a linear gradient, obviously, in a line, or a radial gradient. And if you've used any kind of PowerPoint or Windows graphic program, it will set backgrounds for you with those types of gradients. So the way we do that is we just say background, and then instead of a URL here for an image, we're going to say linear gradient or radial gradient, and then we put the color we want to start with and the color we want to end with. So this previous box here, the code for that is linear gradient and then yellow to blue. But what if we want to do more than two colors? Then you can. So this uses the rainbow of colors, and then the browser will evenly distribute them across the size of the element. Same for a radial. So if we did a radial gradient and we did multiple colors, it would evenly distribute those. That one's kind of psychedelic. But what if I didn't want them evenly distributed? What if I wanted to choose where it started, each color, and where it ended? So you can do that with a color stop position. So where the color starts, the first color, so in this case where I had set yellow to be the first, that's 0%. And at the end, where it's all the way blended and turned to completely blue, would be 100%. And I can set color stops anywhere along the way. The same for radial. The middle of where the first color starts is 0, and all the way out to the edges where it has gradually turned into all blue is 100%. So if I want to change that, then I am going to set a color stop position. And that is just a value as part of our linear gradient property. So I'm going to say the first color and then what percentage I want, and then I end it with blue. If I wanted a percentage for blue, I would do that as well. Now I need to look this up, but it seems like it takes yellow for 70%, and then whatever is left is what blue would do. So if we look at this one, for example, I can set color stop positions for a radial gradient too. So I said yellow 50%, and then it's like blue was 50% of what was left, and then white was 80% of what was left, and then we had green. Because green says 80%, and green is not taking up 80% of the entire element. So that was, I think that's something you would definitely have to play around with to get the look you wanted. But we do definitely like to be in control of things. You can also change the direction of your gradient. So by default, it goes from top to bottom. But if I want to change it, then I'm going to add these keywords to top to bottom, to left to right, or some combination of those. For example, this one, I say to right, and then I say yellow, and then blue, and it's going to move to the right. It's not saying where it starts from, it's saying I want you to move the gradient along from the first color to the second color and to the right. This one I said to top right, so it's going to start in the opposite position and move from yellow to blue to the top right corner. I can also choose a degree. So think of this as a circle. So I wanted the linear gradient to start at a 10-degree angle from yellow to blue. So you can see this line is kind of at a slight angle here, moving from yellow to blue. So you have a lot of options with your gradients, and you have these same keyword directions with a radial, except instead of to top, it says at top. So you're deciding where the center is. So you can start this at the top, at the bottom, at the left, at the right. So this is where the center is. So here's an example. Radial gradient at top left means the middle of this started at the top left. Then I controlled it even more by saying I wanted the color stop position to be at 45% for yellow and then 55 for blue. Okay, so let's try this. Let's look at groovyfish.html. So here it is in the browser. Oops, sorry, I had the wrong file for a moment. So here is groovyfish.html. It has some paragraphs, not describing groovy fish, but actually describing some gradients that we're going to apply. And you can see that there are IDs for each one, gradient 1 through 6. So we'll make this change in our global.css. we are going to go all the way down to the bottom for this new rule. So down here at the bottom, we'll go to our copy code file and get these gradient rules. Let's copy those in. Let's take a look at what we're doing. So for all 6 paragraphs, we are going to set a width and a height and tell it to float left. So I expect them to be lined up and horizontally. I have a border around it, and I have rounded the corners of this. So I'm expecting to see a row of boxes with rounded corners, and they each have a box shadow. And then I'm just setting some font defaults there. Then for gradient 1 and 4, we're going to go ahead and set some styles up. So I have a background image, and then I'm setting my linear gradient yellow, red. Red, yellow. So notice on background image, I have 2 things. I have an image itself, and then I also have this gradient going on. And I noticed how Komodo Edit puts this on a separate line. When I have more than one rule that I'm applying, then more than one value for this property, then it put it on a separate line. That confused me at first, but I like it. So the same is going on down here for gradient 4. 1 will be a linear and 4 will be a radial. Otherwise, they are the same. So let's take a look at how that changed our groovy fish. So yeah, now we have boxes with a nice border and a box shadow. We have an image in each of the boxes, and we have a gradient behind it. So just to show you the difference that gradient makes, if I take this out, oops. Yeah, so that's what it would look like if it was just the image. Because really it looks, over here, it looks like the gradient is the background to the image itself. It's very vibrant, but it isn't. So that's what the image looks like alone. So the radial really adds quite a bit. Let's put it back. You do not have to take yours off and back on again. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. There we go. So you can see the radial starts here right at the fish's head and moves out. And then this would be a linear gradient starting at the top from red to yellow. Go back to the code if you need to see that. So that was put at the very bottom. Okay. So the last thing we're going to talk about is the transform property. So transform changes your element in some way. And the values you can have for transform are translate, rotate, scale, skew, and then a few more that we're not going to cover right now. So we're just going to look at these 4. So translate basically just moves the image over from its original position in the element. So this one is going to move this mouse over and down, over 150 and down 50. So that's our X and Y coordinates. Rotate, pretty much what you would expect. You're going to put a degree in for the value, and you're going to follow it with the letters D, E, G. Rotate 30 degrees. A positive number moves it clockwise, and a negative number moves it counterclockwise. Scale, I'm resetting the X and Y for the width and the height of it. 1 is 100%. So if I have less than 1, I'm shrinking it. So for the width, I set 0.5. That shrunk it. And for anything above 1, I'm expanding it. So 1.5 made this taller than it usually is. And you can see it is a very strange looking image now. And the last one we're going to look at is skew. It's sort of like squishing it to the side. So the X skews it based on the top of the element and Y based on the bottom. Here's what that looks like. So if I skew 20 degrees from using the top, so I've skewed it 20 degrees to the left, then it moves the top of the element skewed. So they say that's skewed in the X direction, left and right. If I skew with the Y direction, then it skews based on the bottom of the element. And I think if I did a negative value here, it would skew it tilted the other way. And here I got all crazy and I skewed both X and Y. The transform property is pretty new. So not all browsers are going to work with it. Some older Chrome and Safari browsers won't work correctly. So they have this workaround called WebKit. So you have to, if you really want skew or transform to work, you can put your transform property in and then follow it up by this WebKit transform to make sure that it works. All right, so let's try it. So now we're going to look at funny fish and see what that looks like right now. There it is. So I just have 4 paragraphs with 1 word apiece. You can see that in the, oops. Oh, it's not a paragraph, it's a div. So I have 4 divs with IDs of fish 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these words are just the type of transform that I'm going to use. So we'll do this in our global.css. Go to your copy code. Scroll down to activity 3. Just copy that big ol' long thing from step 1. Put it at the very bottom. All right, let's look at what's going on. So looking at this, we're going to be arranging these elements into boxes with a rounded corners and box shadows, bold font, the background color. Those are all the common properties for ID fish 1 through 4. And then I'm just setting specifically for each one a different fish image file. So now we have 4 nice looking boxes. And we're going to apply to each one of these now a transform property. So I'm going to go back to my code and we're going to do this on the hover event. That makes sense. So copy this from your copy code file. Put it at the very bottom. So on the hover, let me make this a little bigger. On the hover, transform, we're going to translate. We're going to move the image down and to the right when we hover. And on this one, the fish image will rotate 40 degrees. Not just the image, actually, the whole div. So let's save that. So when I hover over this one, it moves it from its original position. It moves it a lot. I find that a little distracting, but I think they just did that so you could really see how it was working. And then rotates it. I like that one a lot. That's cute. Translate, rotate. So here's what we did in the code. We just added these 2 hover events. Saved it. And that's it. That was a very fast overview of chapter 21. So what you'll be doing in your activity for chapter 21 is you're going to do the transform properties for scale and skew. And then I believe you're also going to do some additional gradients for these boxes on Groovy Fish. And that's it.